I'm going to read to you Les Miserables, Chapter 1, titled The Journey's End. Please, students, follow along in your books as I read. Years ago, I stole a loaf of bread to feed my hungry family. I was sent to prison and sentenced to hard labor. I traded my name for a number. I was no longer Jean Valjean. For 19 years, I was known as number 24,601. That was a dark, lonely time for me. Now, I am old and dying. I write this for my daughter, Cosette. When she reads it, she will know the truth. I hope she can forgive me. I hope she will understand why I did not tell her everything sooner. At the time my story begins, I was the breadwinner in my sister's household. Her husband was dead, and she had 7 children. One year, the winter was very hard. I didn't have work, and we had no food. I couldn't let the children starve, so I broke the baker's window and stole a loaf of bread. I was 25 years old when I lost my freedom. In October of 1815, I was released from prison. 19 years of my life had been spent behind bars. My first taste of freedom filled me with joy. I was free to walk anywhere. That first day, I walked many miles. By nightfall, my bones ached from the cold, damp air, and I was exhausted. I stopped at the best inn in the town of Dean. I entered, and the innkeeper called, "What can I do for you, monsieur?" "I want a meal and a bed," I replied. "I have money." The few francs I had earned in prison were more than enough to pay for food and lodging. "In that case, you're welcome," said the innkeeper. I sat down and waited for my dinner. I waited and waited. The innkeeper was watching me. He had sent a boy out half an hour ago. At that very moment, the boy was at the police station finding out about me. "Will dinner be ready soon?" I finally asked. I was faint with hunger. Just then the boy returned. He handed the innkeeper a scrap of paper. The innkeeper frowned after reading it. He walked over to me. "I'm sorry, monsieur," he said. "I can't have you here." "Why?" I asked. "Would you like me to pay in advance? I have money." "You may have the money," he replied, "but I don't have the room." "Then put me in the stable," I begged. I needed sleep desperately. But even the stable was too good for me. The innkeeper had found out that my name was Jean Valjean. He knew that I carried yellow identity papers, the passport of an ex-convict. Soon everyone in town knew who I was. No one would rent to me. No one would even give me a glass of water. I sat outside in the dark and shivered. I had no strength left. But God was watching over me that night. A kind woman stopped and told me to knock at the bishop's house. The good bishop opened his door to me. The Bishop of Dean lived with his sister and a housekeeper. He was a small man of about 75. He lived a quiet, simple life. He had very little, for he gave all of his money to the poor. I told the bishop I was a convict and explained why. I showed him my yellow passport. "See," I said, "it says I am a dangerous man. I was given 5 years for robbery and 14 more for trying to escape 4 times. I waited for the bishop to tell me to leave. Instead, he invited me to sit down at his table. The good silver was laid out. 2 silver candlesticks graced the table. "This isn't my house, but Christ's," he told me. "You are hungry and thirsty, so you are welcome. Everything in my house is yours." I had never known anyone so generous. What kind of a man was this? How could he open his home to me so freely? It scared me. Maybe that's why I did what I did. I tossed and turned that night. I hadn't slept in a bed for years. At 2 in the morning, I was wide awake. I had one thought on my mind: the bishop's silver. It took me an hour to decide, but in the end I did it. I took my shoes off, tiptoed to the cupboard, and stole the bishop's silver. It was a foolish thing to do. The police caught me by dawn. They brought me back to the bishop's house. He spoke before I could say a word. "I'm delighted to see you again," he said. "You forgot to take the silver candlesticks with you when you left. I wanted you to have them as well. They're worth a good 200 francs. I was stunned. This godly man was forgiving my crime, and he was also giving me his only valuable possessions, his precious silver. It was too much for me. I couldn't believe what was happening. The police left. The bishop looked at me and said, "I have bought your soul for God. Promise me you will use the money from this silver to become an honest man." I was confused when I left the bishop. I wandered the countryside in a daze. I didn't know where I was going, nor did I care. Memories of my years in prison flooded my mind. Suddenly I was angry. God had given me such a hard life. A boy came walking toward me on the footpath. He was flipping a coin. The coin dropped in the dirt just as he passed me. I stamped my foot on it. "Monsieur, my franc!" "It's under your foot," the boy pleaded. I screamed at him to get lost. The look of terror in his eyes was like a wild animal's. I yelled again, and the boy bolted. I did all this without thinking. Then suddenly I saw what I had done. I was a monster. I had stolen from a child. I broke down and wept. I prayed for forgiveness. I tried to find the boy to make things right, but he was gone. Oddly, my anger was also gone. The bishop's love had cast it out. I was a changed man. I was truly free for the first time in my life. I have never committed another crime.